Good evening. I call to order the meeting of the mayor and trustees of the Village of Burr Ridge for Monday, April 10, 2023. Let's see, Janine, can you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Janine. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Trustee Schiappa?
Here.
Trustee Paveza?
Here.
Trustee Snyder?
Here.
Trustee Mattal?
Here.
Trustee Smith?
Here.
Trustee Francis is not here. Mayor Grasso?
Here. Trustee Francis gave us advance notice that he would not be able to attend tonight's meeting. Tonight we have two presentations, well, a presentation and a public hearing. The first is the presentation of the 2022 Annual Police Report. Chief? Deputy Chief? Deputy Chiefs? Floor is yours.
Good. I appreciate the opportunity to come before you and present our annual report for 2022. This is going to be just a summary and highlights of the actual report that will be posted on our website shortly, as soon as we finish dotting the i's and making sure everything's spelled correctly. Some of the highlights of 2022 for the police department. The police department responded to 27,290 calls for service. Of those calls for service, 2,889 of those were traffic stops, proactive enforcement. The department implemented body cameras and brand new in-car video cameras in advance of the state mandate that's coming in 2025. We got ahead of the curve on this one, and it's been working out really well for us. We implemented a lateral transfer program to recruit and retain qualified applicants. We're drawing from a pool of experienced candidates that are looking to come to Burr Ridge because it's a better place to work than where they do work now. And we believe that. It's been successful. We started this in 2022. I can tell you in 2023, we've hired one officer already. A second will be starting May 1st from a lateral list. So they're coming in, the two now are coming in with 6 and 8 years of experience respectively. One of the highlights for us, and we've talked about this many times in front of the board, is our need for training. And we've implemented virtual reality training to help us comply with some of the mandates of the Safety Act. Of the 27,000 plus calls that we responded to, you'll see based on our reported crimes and the number of traffic stops we do, the majority of our calls are in service to the community. Helping where it's needed, things that we go above and beyond for the community, for things that they need. It's animal calls, it's helping people get their cars unlocked if they lock themselves in it. It's performing extra watches through the neighborhoods and through the business district. So of those 27,000 plus calls, I will tell you the majority are of service calls to the community. In our calls for service, you'll notice we have BC and PC, before COVID and post-COVID. When you see a big drop occur in 2020, just know that everything dropped with COVID, and we're now back to above our 2016 calls for service. So everything's picking back up. As I said, most of the calls that we do are service calls, but we do respond to reported crimes in the village. And you can see that the curve follows, again, BC and PC, before COVID and post-COVID. The two types of crimes that we like to point out are property crimes and violent crimes. As you can see, our violent crimes are very low. Our property crimes Consistent with years past, a little higher than last year, but in line with things we've experienced before COVID. The Part 1, or the violent crimes we talk about, are murder, rape, robbery, assault, burglary, larceny, theft, and auto theft. The majority of those crimes against people are property crimes, or your forgery and frauds, your narcotics offenses, your weapons offenses. So those are the types of crimes we talk about when we talk about property crimes versus violent crimes. And in detail, compare the three main types of crime: theft, burglary, and vehicle theft. You can see up a touch in some areas, but again, a downward decline since 2018. And in detail, the one that affects us most personally as a department and as a resident, if you're a victim of this, is residential burglary, where somebody enters or remains in your home to commit a felony or a theft. This year we had 18 residential burglaries, and I like to point out, just for point of reference, our burglaries, our Hinsdale's burglaries, our Oak Brook's burglaries, our Skokie and the North Shore burglaries. The criminals don't respect boundaries. They don't know boundaries. They don't care about boundaries. So what we're seeing, when we pinpoint our burglaries, we expand it out and recognize that these same crews, these same types of crews are hitting all these towns. So what we've done, our investigators and our patrol officers coordinate with other towns throughout the suburbs to create saturation patrols and use the best data that we can compile from the other towns' burglaries, because if we just took ours, it's hard to pinpoint date, time, location. And when you expand it out and use other data, we can take these saturation patrols and focus in on dates and times where we can put a bunch of people together to go and target a problem. As earlier as 2 hours ago, our detectives were out and 6 burglars are in custody with the help of Naperville, Skokie, North Shore towns. Caught them in the act. So it's a targeted patrol tactic that we're using that we hope is working. One of the things that we've seen, we see a tick up. Generally, we've dealt with 2 threats. Your regular burglar coming from outside the area to target a wealthy neighborhood, and we've seen your ruse burglars, the burglars that come in packs, distract people and get into their house. This year, we've seen a third threat added to this, what we call a South American theft group, which is a group of individuals coming in from a couple of countries in South America, coming through the South, through visa applications, getting in here. And this crew is not just hitting in Illinois, not just hitting in Burr Ridge or the surrounding suburbs, they're hitting across the country from California to New York. So we've added a third threat that we're targeting, and we've seen 7 more burglaries this year than last year, but we've added a third threat to the crew. Motor vehicle thefts. We had a good year last year. We had a not so good year this year, comparatively. But once again, we'll point out, as we've pointed out over and over and over again, every stolen motor vehicle that occurred in town was unlocked with the keys left inside.
Everyone,
Every one.
so very preventable.
The 11 this last year, the 4 the year before that, everyone unlocked with the keys left inside. We engage in various forms of community crime prevention education to try and reduce that risk. I think that might have come across in the message when we only had 4. But complacency, out of sight, out of mind, you forget about it. We try to avoid message fatigue, beating people over the head about lock your cars, lock your doors, take your key inside, don't leave valuables in the car, but it occurs. It still occurs, and it occurred 11 times last year.
Well, I think it's important on the website or somewhere, that's that. Every one of them is due to unlocked and keys in the car. Every one.
Yes, sir.
So the community has to help itself.
Yeah.
And if it helps itself, we won't have vehicle thefts. So let's highlight that every one is due to somebody leaving their keys in the car and the doors unlocked.
On a positive note, our motor vehicle thefts, based on the expansion of our license plate recognition camera system and the expansion of that program throughout the state, throughout the country, our time to recovery has decreased greatly. We're getting them back in sometimes hours instead of days and weeks like we have in the past. Our violent crimes, as I mentioned earlier, have consistently since 2017 and probably before been under 10 reported for the year. Your violent crimes are robbery, rape, murder, aggravated battery. You see our murder is one. It was a highly publicized event in March of last year. As of note is that your sexual assault calls, your forcible rape as it's reported in the crime report, we are mandated to take any report that comes into the station. So whether it occurred in Burr Ridge or not, if somebody comes to report, our duty is to take a report from that person and help them get the resources they need. So it doesn't necessarily mean that crime occurred here, but it still appears as a statistic on our report. We have a robbery that occurred in the village last year, and I can tell you that that was a result of two individuals meeting up for illicit activity, and they didn't get along. So that crime occurred nevertheless. So with that being said, I will reiterate that violent crimes against people are down and low, and we remain generally safe with that. We had almost 30,000 calls for service. We had almost 3,000 traffic stops. These are occurrences. Traffic stops in particular are unknown, regardless of if it's grandma driving without one headlight or a car with tinted windows that you can't see anybody inside. The potential for using force increases on traffic stops when there's an unknown. With that said, our contacts with the public result in very minimal use of force. Less than 1%, based on all calls of service, resulted in the use of force. And some of these are the end result of chases that have come through town where officers have drawn their weapons, pointed, and displayed their weapons to gain compliance. And some instances are people where the officers are escorting them by holding their arms. And we over-report our use of force, so there's no confusion about when somebody goes hands-on, when an officer goes hands-on with the subject. So our use of force incidents are low. They continue to be low. I attribute that a little bit to the well-trained department and de-escalation techniques. And that's been years in the making, starting with crisis intervention team training, de-escalation techniques. We've seen instances in the past where we've responded to calls of mental health crisis where it results in a use of force trying to help the person get into an ambulance, get the help they need. That has gone down because of their ability to talk people down without needing to go hands-on. So kudos to all the officers that have to go out there on a daily basis and deal with the unknown. They're doing a great job of it, and they're keeping us safe. They're keeping everybody safe, and they're minimizing our liability by having to go hands-on with people.
And, Deputy Chief Loftus, am I correct that we've had no complaints of excessive force use?
Correct. I've been deputy chief for 15 years, or somewhere around that. None since I've been deputy chief, and I can't recall before that. We train and we train and we train, and it's not, if you train well in the building, you'll do it well on the street.
Well, it's something to be proud of.
Thank you.
The police department, the community should be proud of that too. Thank you.
Motor vehicle pursuits, again, a high-risk event that we would try to avoid at all costs unless absolutely necessary. And the officers and their supervisors know the limitations of pursuing a vehicle. There were 6 pursuits last year. Comparatively, there were 9 instances where an offender fled from a traffic stop that could have resulted in a pursuit. But because the officers and the supervisors know when to pursue and when not to pursue, 9 of them resulted in fleeing and eluding charges later. Based on, can I ID the person? Can we apprehend them safely later? We don't need to pursue them. Of those 6 pursuits, 5 of them were from other jurisdictions coming through town that we assisted on. One of them was for a murder in the city. 2 of them were for aggravated battery to police officers. 1 car ran over an officer's foot. So when there's a threat like that involved and the need for apprehension outweighs the danger that it presents, then we'll engage in a pursuit and we'll assist other agencies for the pursuit. One of the other things that we do is we have spike strips that we use that we can throw out and deflate tires on a vehicle, and we'll use those sparingly depending on what the reason for the chase is. One of our new officers that we welcomed is Burr Ridge Air 1. We got a DJI Matrice 30 drone in October. It's come in handy for us. We've used it for things like searching for missing persons, armed fleeing subjects at UPS, perimeter security at one of our events. We've used it out on burglaries and assisting other agencies. Really gives us a, it's our little version of a helicopter, and it helps out in the area very well. We have 5 trained FAA licensed drone pilots. We hope to add more. This is really kind of a game changer for us, especially in the wooded areas that we have around here. It has a FLIR heat seeking, so you can see hot spots in the woods if you're looking for a person or an object thrown out into the woods. So we appreciate that we quickly came before the board with the request for this purchase and quickly before Administrator Walter, and we were able to get it before the case of Burr Ridge in October. We had it deployed, we had pilots trained. It really was a quick turnaround on this. And we were happy to get it, and we look forward to using it for more events. We've used it, we've gone to South Suburban College and used it as PR, as a kind of a recruiting tool for the criminal justice class. It's one of those things that people love to see and love to see in use. And for me, finally, we're in our 3rd or 4th year of CALIA accreditation that we've been continuing since 2007. CALIA is an agency in a private, not-for-profit agency out of Virginia that publishes best standards practices for law enforcement, dispatch, and training facilities. Our law enforcement accreditation is reviewed once a year by an assessor from CALIA to find if we're following those best practices. And every 4th year, a team of assessors comes out, inspects the building, does interviews, ride-alongs, and acknowledges after the 4th year that yes, we are in compliance with these best practices. This helps us with liability. Again, that's what it's all about, making sure that we're doing the best we can for the residents of Burr Ridge, giving them a professional police organization that they can be proud of. We look forward to continuing this with bringing on Lexipol, which is a policy, training, and procedure company that will help us. The onboarding of that will greatly help us with continued compliance of over 400 standards from CALIA and updating our over 180 policies and procedures that we have. With that, I'll turn it over to Deputy Chief Husaric.
All right, traffic crash analysis. Every year, we analyze all the crashes that happened in the village on public streets the previous year. We look at when they happened, the cause of the crash, where it happened, and using those statistics, we can try to focus on preventing those same types of crash the next year. So in 2022, we had 171 crashes on public roadways, which was an increase over 2021, but it was still in line with our 5-year average and actually better than our 10-year average. 37 of those crashes result in injury. Unfortunately, 3 of those included a fatality. The fatal crashes involved a pedestrian that was struck crossing Route 83 on foot. Pedestrian was struck by a vehicle, went to the hospital and did not survive. We also had a bicyclist that was struck by a vehicle on Wolf Road and 79th Street, and also a vehicle that was T-boned while making a U-turn on Route 83 at Honeysuckle Rose Lane. And in the chart there, it ranks the worst intersections in our village by number of crashes that we had by year. The left side of the chart is the most recent year, 2022, so you can see Route 83 in South Frontage and Route 83 and 91st Street were our 2 worst locations in terms of number of crashes. Those are 2 locations on Route 83 that are both controlled by a traffic signal. Other than that, we had a couple on County Line Road, and then Wolf and 79th Street had only 6 crashes, but it was unusually high for that. We are planning to install 20 more flock cameras around town. It's expanding on a program that we already have. DC Loft has brought up collaborating with other agencies to help solve crimes, and this is one way that we do it. A lot of agencies in the area are getting these flock cameras, and they can all share information through that system. If, say, Willowbrook has an armed robbery, they can put the offending vehicle in the system, and then we'll be notified if it crosses one of our cameras. So the point of these cameras is license plate recognition. They capture the license plate, they can run it through some systems and determine if the vehicle is wanted or if the vehicle is stolen. The effect of that is twofold. It helps us solve crimes. After a crime, most people tend to flee in a vehicle, and we're able to go back in time and hopefully find the vehicle that was involved in that crime. Also, these cameras help us prevent crime. If a car is known to be involved in burglaries or a felonious vehicle or is stolen, and it crosses one of these cameras, our officers will get notified almost immediately that the camera is entering our town and hopefully converge on the area and be able to prevent a crime before it occurs. A lot of the costs of those were covered by grants as well. We also got these new cameras. We all got body cameras last year. We've had them for about 6 months. Also, we got new cameras for our squad cars. Our old system in our squad cars was on its last legs. These cameras are a big upgrade in terms of resolution. Both these camera systems, the body cams and the squad car fleet cameras, are owned by Axon, which is a company that's best known for tasers. We also have Axon tasers. And the great thing about the Axon system is all these pieces of equipment work together. If we were to turn on the emergency lights in a vehicle, it sends out a signal to any body cams in the area to automatically turn on. Same thing with drawing our firearm or activating our taser. That also signals all the body cams in the area to turn on. The idea is if there's some emergency, some event that happens suddenly and officers have to draw their weapon, they may not be thinking, and we don't necessarily want them thinking, oh, I have to turn on my body camera first before I do anything. So this is kind of a fail-safe way to make sure that we get as many video cameras recording the event as possible. There are some recent retirements and these are just promotions from our agency. We got Deputy Chief Husaric there in the upper left. And then Chris Garcia was promoted to sergeant. Chris has been with our department for 13, 14 years. He specializes in a lot of things. He's a firearms instructor, he's an armorer, he's got SWAT team experience, so he's in charge of one of the 4 patrol shifts. And these are some of our new hires. Officer Nicole Kopp just had her 1-year anniversary. She graduated from Celia, which is a police academy at the College of DuPage. And then we have Community Service Officer Samantha Teams. She's been here since November. Prior to that, though, she had 20 years of experience in public safety. She worked at a dispatch center. She was actually training dispatchers, so she has a lot of experience with a lot of the same stuff that we do, and she's been very helpful. She handles a lot of our parking situations, and she's very active in code enforcement and local adjudication. She not necessarily issues a lot of tickets, but resolves a lot of code enforcement type complaints. So we're lucky to have both of these new officers. And that's it. Does anybody have any questions?
Start with the board. Any trustees have any questions? Anybody in the public have any questions? No, no questions means thorough job. Thank you. That takes us to our next item. I call to order the public hearing for the fiscal year 2024 budget. Evan?
Thank you. This is statutorily required that we have a public hearing to review the budget ordinance, which is attached. There's a brief summary there attached in your summary packet. There's more, about 30 pages worth of addendum to that ordinance in the back. It generally follows the direction that the board gave us at the March 13th budget workshop.
Is there anyone in the public that would like to comment on the 2024 budget? Any comment or questions from anybody on the board? If not, can I get a motion to close the public hearing for the fiscal year 2024 budget?
So moved. Second.
Roll call, please.
Trustee Snyder?
Yes.
Trustee Paveza?
Yes.
Trustee Skiappa?
Yes.
Trustee Natal?
Yes.
Trustee Smith?
Yes.
5-0.
5-0, the motion passes. The public hearing is closed. That takes us to item 4, the consent agenda. All items listed with an asterisk are considered routine by the board and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a board member or citizen requests, in which event the item will be removed from the consent agenda, discussed, open for public comment, and voted upon during this meeting. Excuse me. 5 minutes A, approval of regular board meeting of March 27, 2023. 6, ordinances B, approval of an ordinance amending Chapter 2509 of Chapter 25 entitled Liquor Control of the Burr Ridge Municipal Code. C, approval of an ordinance amending Section 58 of the Burr Ridge Municipal Code, Water Works System. D, approval of an ordinance amending Section 59 of the Burr Ridge Municipal Code, Sewer Systems. And E, approval of an ordinance amending Section 9 of the zoning ordinance to amend the regulations in the office districts for trucking or logistics company uses, Z03-2023 text amendment, trucking company offices. 7, resolutions C, approval of a resolution approving extraterritorial final plat Moose's subdivision, DuPage County, 10 South 381 Madison Street. 8, considerations B, approval of purchase of police training management software from Lexable in the amount of $51,017.60. C, approval of a contract award for additional design and construction engineering services on the 79th Street Pedestrian Improvements Project to Primera Engineers of Lyle in the amount of $49,330. E, approval of a proclamation designating April 23 to April 29, 2023 as Arbor Day Week. E, accept and file resignation letter of Police Officer Travis Madler. F, approval of a request for a raffle license for Gower School Parent Teacher Organization for their trivia night event on April 29, 2023. And G, approval of the vendor list dated April 10, 2023 in the amount of $156,171.03 for all funds, plus $210,365.69 for payroll period ending April 1, 2023, a grand total of $366,536.72. Can I get a motion to approve the following items on the consent agenda?
So moved.
5A, 6B, C, D, and E, 7C, 8B through G.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion, a second. Any questions? The board, any questions from the public? Roll call, please.
Trustee Natal? Yes. Trustee Skiappa?
Yes.
Trustee Kaveza?
Yes.
Trustee Snyder?
Yes.
Trustee Smith?
Yes.
5-0.
5-0, the motion passes. That takes us to 6, ordinances. A, consideration of an ordinance adopting the budget for all corporate purposes of the Village of Burr Ridge, DuPage, and Cook Counties, Illinois, for the fiscal year commencing on May 1, 2023, and ending on April 30, 2024. Can you get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion, a second. Any questions from the board? Any questions from the public? Roll call, please.
Trustee Smith?
Yes.
Trustee Skiappa?
Yes.
Trustee Kaveza?
Yes.
Trustee Snyder?
Yes.
Trustee Natal? Yes.
5-0, the motion passes. Takes us to 7, resolutions. A, consideration of a resolution changing the starting time of regular village board meetings in the Village of Burr Ridge. Evan?
Thank you, Mayor. This is a resolution which would change the start of regular board meetings from 7 p.m. to 6:30 p.m., effective with the May 8th, 2023 board meeting. State law requires we notice the public in newspapers, so we would need some extra time to make this happen, but all this requires is a approval of a resolution to set forth going forward.
Can I get a motion to so approve changing the starting time of regular village board meetings in the Village of Burr Ridge from 7 p.m. to 6:30?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion at the board level? Any discussion at the public level? Roll call, please.
Trustee Skiappa?
Yes.
Trustee Snyder?
Yes.
Trustee Natal? Yes. Trustee Smith?
Yes.
Trustee Kaveza?
Yes.
5-0.
5-0, the motion passes. 7B, consideration of a resolution adopting a revised police pension funding policy. Evan?
Thank you, Mayor. One of the board's goals that you have laid down for staff in the organization is to take a look at our police pension policies as a whole. This board directed trustees Mytal and Smith to work with staff and our actuaries to come up with some revisions to our current pension policy, and we're pleased to present a recommendation to you tonight to accomplish that goal. So currently, for context, the village is currently paying about $900,000 per year on the employer side of the police pension fund. There are contributions which come in from the police, from the employee side, but the vast majority of revenue into this fund comes from the village itself. It is a state requirement that we do provide a pension at a certain rate, and our pension payments are the obligation that we fill in fulfillment of state law. Our pension payments have gone up from about $600,000 in 2016 to about $900,000 this year, and under our current system, they're scheduled to go up precipitously through 2040. State law requires that we be funded at 90%, or at least have a plan to be in place to have be 90% funded by 2040. That's something called a closed amortization system. What you'll see in a moment here is the two systems on a funding basis, but overall, it's safe to say that we will go up to over $2 million in the next 15 years. It is also safe to say that we cannot afford $2 million in pension payments in the next 15 years. So looking at the fund, we currently have a very simple police pension policy, which is simply to fund 100% of the statutory minimum required contribution to the pension fund. Now, by default, we've adopted the 90% funded by 2040 pension funding policy under a closed system. That's just what the state dictates to us. We also do what the state dictates to us in terms of funding the pension fund, which is the statutory minimum requirement. Now, every year, our actuaries, Lauterbach and Amon, provide us with two numbers. The first number is the statutory minimum. The Second is the recommended contribution. Those are both dollar amounts that the village can and should put into the pension fund every year. It is our current policy that we fund the lower of the two, which is the statutory minimum. We have a 7% assumed rate of return, which means that on a basic level, we assume we will achieve a gross 7% return on an annual basis on trend. So if we have a 4% one year and a 10% one year, we have effectively met our assumed rate of return on trend. Of course, we do not hit 7% exactly every year, but it's an average. The recommended proposed police pension policy is to fund 100% of the required actuarial recommended contribution to the pension fund. Now, earlier I said that we would be funding the higher of the two amounts if we do the statutory recommendation. But in fact, this statutory recommendation, or this required actuarial recommendation, is lower than the closed system. We'd also be moving to a 100% open funded system by 2040 with an assumed rate of return of 7%. Now, the difference between closed and open is as follows. A closed system, sorry, I'm echoing a little bit. A closed system requires that you have everything funded by a fixed date in time. In this case, 2040 being the closed fixed system. The best example I can provide is if you have a retirement date set in your mind. So if you'd like to retire at a certain age, we'll call it 65 just for academic discussion, and you have to have so much saved by that time. That is your goal, to amortize your retirement savings by 65 years old. Now, in the case of the village, our retirement system is at 2040. But what happens when we have a recession, or we have negative returns in 2038, or things just don't quite go the way we want to in terms of contributions in 2038? You have two options. You can either put more money in, or you can move that date back. Now, because we're under a closed fixed system, we don't have the option under our current policy to move that date. So that's where we get those big ramp ups in terms of funding closer we get to 2040. Under an open system, we'd be funding everything on a permanent, ongoing, fixed interval basis. In this case, on a 20-year basis. So if we were to hire an officer in 2038, we would have until 2057, in theory, to fund 100% of that person's pension liabilities by 2057. The village will exist in all theoretical basis past 2040, so we should be thinking about how we fund everything beyond 2040. It only makes sense that that would happen. Again, using a 7% assumed rate of return, that is what IPOPIF uses, that's what the state's combined pension management system is, as well as a number of comparable communities around us average a 7% return. Some are a little ahead, some are a little below, but at the end of the day, 7% is a good, solid number as recommended by our actuaries. Let's quickly discuss what this will mean in terms of what the village will actually put into the pension fund on an annual basis. Now keep in mind, we've just passed the budget, we've already passed the property tax levies for the year. This will take place next budget cycle. So we're going to be entering FY 2024. These policies will take effect in 2025, calendar year 24. So this will all take effect in real terms in August when we get our actuarial results back from our pension fund, and then in November and December when we talk about the property tax levy on an actual going forward basis. So the blue line is our closed system that we're in right now. And as you can see, it goes up precipitously over the next 15 years. That is the recommended dollar amount that the pension actuary says we put in, about $1.2 million next year. It would go up to almost $2.2 million by 2040. Again, I cannot stress enough that we cannot afford to go that high. Really can't even afford to approach that in any real capacity. The orange line is what would be the result of moving to a 20-year, 100% open amortization result. Pension payments would go to about $1.060 million, so $1,060,000, and would cap out just over $1.2 million. So there'd be very, very good cost controls by moving to a 20-year open amortization system. Again, this is because we always have as a moving target, 20 years in advance, amortize our liabilities over a long-term basis. What this also would do is it would also slowly increase our funded levels beyond where we're at now. We're at 71% now, and by 2040 we would reach 82%. One of the things that the working group, myself and the trustees noticed from the board is that there was a concerted effort not to be at 100%. It's not that being at 100% is bad, it's just that that was an investment the board had stated they were not willing to put in at this time. So again, in 2040, this pension fund would be at 82%. By 2050, it would be at 87%. So again, going from 71 to 82 to 87. Over time, little by little, the funding ratio would go up, and our total liability percentage would go down. But as you can see, there is considerable savings, there's considerable cost control, and a lot of predictability for the future in ways we don't currently have. One of the things that Trustee Maital had asked me about during our discussions was taking the guesswork out of the pension fund. The proposal that the working group has come up with takes the guesswork out of the pension fund. It creates a reliably funded system. Now, how would we pay for this? Now, it's not significantly higher, but one of the things we wanted to do is discuss a lockbox approach to make sure that funding was always available. So in 2022, we have basically 3 property tax levies combining to make our overall property tax levies. Because we don't need significantly more monies to implement the proposal, we do not need any increases in property taxes or new revenues to fund the proposed recommendation. One more time, we do not need any property tax increases to fund the recommended revisions. What we would like to propose is that the police pension, the police protection, and the corporate lines be reorganized to have the police pension property tax line, one of 3, pay for 100% of the required funding as dictated by our actuary. So as you can see here, our property tax is about $1.34 million this year. Those 3 lines at 69, 12, and 18% combine to make that $1.34 million line item. In 2023, the 78, the 21, and the 0 would combine to make a $1.34 million property tax line. In 2024, again, just for a trend discussion, the 80 and the 20 and the 0, again, is a $1.34 million property tax levy. Over time, that means your property taxes will actually decrease by a small amount every year while maintaining 100% actuarially required contributions to your pension fund. Once again, no property tax increases are necessary to implement this revision on a recommended basis. So in summary, the current policy is projected to require almost $29 million in funding over the next 16 years. The vast majority of that is scheduled between 2030 and 2040. The proposed policy would be almost $8 million in savings through 2040 and cost about $20,500,000. Again, those are our current pension funding percentages, our funding level goals for both the current and the proposed policies. And in final, this policy does meet all requirements of the state law, the state pension code, requires no additional property taxes or other revenue sources to fund. It will continue to fund the police pension fund beyond 2040, and the funding level will increase beyond 2040. And finally, one of the things that we do want to note is that when we have credit ratings, we don't actually currently have a credit rating right now because we are debt-free.
Debt-free.
Let's say it again while we're here. One of the things that Moody's talked about was you have debt, now we don't have debt, and the second thing was you have to get your pension contributions under control. As you can see under the orange line, I think that Trustees Smith and Rittal have returned a recommendation to do that. So again, the 2 things that Moody had knocked us on from a credit rating perspective, one of them has absolutely been addressed because we have no debt, and I believe this takes a significant step to our credit worthiness on a forward-looking basis. There is a resolution attached tonight. I only wrote that we're seeking direction, but if you do choose to make an action tonight, that is available to you. There are 2 additional items that we wanted to note as part of the recommendation. 3, I should say. The first is that this will be revisited every year from an actuarial basis, and then every 3 years we'll look at the policy as a whole. Just take a look at it on a structural basis. Does this continue to work for us? We do that again in FY27. The second thing is to assign $100,000 in general fund balance to make sure that we have that extra little bit of breathing room in the event we needed it. And the third is to have a one-time payment of $200,000 from the general fund to the pension fund this year as a way to just provide an additional line of investment for the pension fund. Throwing a lot of information at you. Happy to take any questions at this time. Thank you.
Russ and Anita understand it, so if you want to say something now, fine, but let's see if we get some questions first. So note that the property tax that we get is being used basically dollar for dollar to fund the pension. That means we run the village on everything else, not property taxes. But at the same time, we have a program in place that meets the law, stays where we are, which is 72, 71% funded, which is an enviable place to be for most municipalities. And it increases that from 71 to, we get into the low 80s through this program. So still very, very, very healthy, probably very enviable police pension. And think about Burr Ridge and doing this, and trying to think about 200 other communities you can think of that won't be able to do this. But we have to take care of our pension, our police pension obligations, and this seems to be a very effective way to do it, still understanding that we're using all of our property taxes to go into the police pension. So with that, do we have any questions? Yes, Tony?
First, I want to thank Trustee Smith and Natal for your work doing this. This is a fabulous solution to the problem that we were facing towards the end of our so-called retirement date of 2040. So I want to thank you so much for putting the time and effort for putting this plan together. So I agree with this plan. I think it's great for the village, for the police pension, for our officers. But I want to address some of the other conditions. So the first one was we will start this in 1 year. We'll revisit for every 3 years, which I agree with. They want $100,000 for, sounds like insurance or what?
Yeah, so assigned fund balance is something that the board can do. They can assign fund balance to act for terms as decreed by the assigned fund balance. So the last example we had for assigned fund balance is we had $800,000 in the budget for the 71st Street Bridge as assigned fund balance. So by rule, I could not access that by proposal.
Okay.
But the board, 2020, 2021, said we're going to deassign that and just make it unassigned fund balance. So assigning fund balance can generally mean you can only use it for a certain use.
Okay.
In this case, that $100,000 would be, we'll call it just in case extra pension funding down the road if necessary.
Okay. Is that sunset or is that indefinite?
I don't think we envisioned a sunset at this time, but
Okay.
in perpetuity.
And that 800,000 is the 800,000 we've been sitting on since we swapped out the bridge that was never built on 71st Street onto Wolf Road when Opus was building the village center, and they gave us $800,000 to get out of that obligation, and we put that $800,000 away, and so it's still sitting there for us.
Okay. For us in the general fund?
Yes.
Okay.
How the board, this board and future boards want to use it.
Right. Yeah, I'd like to see a sunset on that provision. And then the last provision, it's another $200,000 on top of what we've contributed already this year. There's another $200,000.
Correct. So we've already contributed another $84,000 as part of the budget, and this would be an additional $200,000 on top of that, one time.
And does that contribute the additional to, do we need to make that investment to meet these goals, 2040 and 2050?
No, so to clarify, so I'm going to use the chart. The orange line is based on no additional funding at all. So
Okay.
it helped a small amount every year bring down the orange line in the future, yes.
Small amount, by
I would say if we put in $200,000 in that, we would probably get something around $250, $275 in lifetime investment value for it. So you probably have a 10%, 15% over life of it return. $10,000 a year, probably lower payment.
Okay. All right. So those are my questions. Thank you.
Okay, Al, you okay?
The state basically dictates how much money we should put in our pension fund. And evidently, they haven't been doing a good job because we're putting in what we're supposed to, and we're basically hanging right around 71%. And I saw the way to go, and a few things I have. How much, to get to 82% or whatever that is in 2040, how much per year extra is that gonna have us put in? Yeah, you had it up there and it went sort of quick.
So, this year we've put in $923,000 total. It would be about $125,000 a year more next year if we were to adopt the orange line policy. However, the actuary is always pretty clear that you should be putting in the blue line, which would be about $300,000 more than the orange line policy. So overall, the orange line is a net savings, both cumulatively as well as short term.
To your point, Al, we are addressing as a board, and every village has to face this, what we call unfunded mandates. We're being told by Springfield, you villages need to do this, and we're not giving you one nickel to do it with. The vast majority of municipalities around Illinois have fallen significantly short of 70%, 65%, 60%. There are pension, police and fire pensions in other villages under 50%, okay? So at least with the help of Trustee Smith and Mattal, we've come up with a program where we are addressing an unfunded mandate and still meeting our mandate obligations. And more importantly, making the police department and our officers secure in the knowledge that their pension's going to be there when they need it, which is really our obligation. So this solves that problem without unduly burdensome the village finances.
So you want, I just wanted to ask Evan here, now, considering the financial position we're in, which is excellent, there's no doubt in your mind that we can handle this extra money per year and not hurt our plans that we have to improve stuff over the next 10 years?
I'm going to leave it more in the shorter term. 10 years is a long way out. That's 2032. However, I can say that one of the things that we know implicitly through the budget process is that the village is prepared for opportunities. That was my budget message. We intentionally transferred a significant amount of money to the capital fund, A, because there was a lot of capital to fund, but B, because we didn't want to show phantom $1 million general fund surpluses going out. I have no concerns that the orange line can be funded at 100% going forward. I have no concerns at all.
Doug, do you want to say anything?
Well, thank you again, Trustee Mattal and Trustee Smith, for spending the extra time with staff. And Evan, to your team too, thank you for doing this. One, the police pension has been one of those things since the beginning. We looked at before and closed was never gonna work. We knew that the way it is. Two, you brought up again, Mayor, we're not raising taxes. For additional payments into a plan where you have this going to go out 20 years or 20-year open and it'd be 100% funded, I would vote against with any additional money in. You have enough things, and being when I was put on the water committee, we got enough situations where we put enough pressure on our own teams here. With an extra $300,000, you can fix one of the water towers and put something additional that way. If next year comes and we can pull something from somewhere, I'm all for it. But at this moment, we've got something that looks fantastic. You're ahead of the game in every other village. Our trustees have went with staff and put this together, but any additional funding, this board voted, I went along with it to pay off all debt. Debt now is what, 7, 8, 9%. Got to borrow money at 1%. I know your village can't be a profit, but as business people, we like to make a profit for this. We like to keep the money in the bank. If we need to, then we can give our great commissioner over there to let him fix another road and keep everything else in play for now. We can revisit it next year, just like you have in the program every year, and the third year, really go through it again. Well done to staff and Trustee Mattal and Smith.
Great. Thank you, Joe. You guys want to say anything?
Yeah, do you want to go first? Or? Okay. The way I understood it, and I wanted to thank staff and Evan, he's put in a lot of time, but there are three things that control control the pension. One is the number of beneficiaries. So at this time, we have 40 beneficiaries who are receiving benefit from the pension fund. And currently, our police force is 27 members. So one would expect that the need for pensions will go down in the future. Secondly, the investment experience, we have no control over it, but we're with trusted advisors. The only thing we can control are contributions. And I think this is, the orange line is probably our best bet because the village can plan for it. We have money that is allocated for it. And then we're not stuck with surprises every year because I asked Evan, I said, how many times have they changed the number? And he informed me that it's only been 2 years when they have not changed the number. So as a village, I think it's very difficult to keep changing your plan and feel guilty at the same time.
And when you say they, you mean Springfield?
Yes,
Yes.
yes. And now we have a system in place. Evan's worked it out very nicely that what we get from the taxes will go towards the pension fund. And then we'll have a contingency which will be used in case we need to put a little extra in. So I think we have a good plan. Thank you.
Well said. Trustee Smith.
I'd like to hear from Deputy Chief Husarick about the response from our rank and file officers, since this is all about, their pension, their future. Deputy Chief, if I could hear from you what the commentaries were and what the impression is.
Just FYI, Deputy Chief is president of our pension board.
Yeah, I am president of the pension board. I can't give our official recommendation. We have not been able to talk about this yet. We actually have a meeting scheduled for tomorrow, so tomorrow we'll talk about it. We have been saying for years that the unfunded liability is skyrocketing, and then the village's required contributions skyrocket in turn. And we know that blue line right there is a very large burden for the village to overcome financially. So we are all for, or at least I am all for, a system more like that orange line that's much more stable and realistic in my view. I'm encouraged that this board has been talking about increasing contributions above the bare minimum for, I've been on the board for about 14 years, and every single one of those years it's been the statutory required minimum contribution amount. So when Evan started looking into this like 2 years ago, how can we contribute more to the pension and actually improve the funding percentage, we were encouraged, and I think he spent a lot of time, village staff has spent a lot of time coming up with a good plan. I think it's a good plan. They used a modeler tool to come up with a bunch of different scenarios, and I think that they probably came up with a decent one here. So I'm very encouraged by it. I actually haven't heard a lot of opinions from our officers as I've been on vacation the last week, but I think they would be encouraged by this as well.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else?
No, I just want to thank staff and Trustee Mattel for working on this project. I think it just says a lot about our village. The police pension's always been an overhang, and it just feels really good to finally address this, get ahead of the curve, and basically get this behind us so that we have a real viable future for the village and for our police pension. So I think this is a great move. Thank you.
And understanding that we can't predict the future, we're going to look at this every 3 years so that we make sure we can adjust it and stay with the philosophy of making sure the pension is secure for our officers. So I'm hearing consensus, and while it's on the agenda as a resolution, I think we can adopt the policy tonight if there's a motion, right?
Correct.
So can I get a motion to adopt the revised police pension funding policy consistent with the orange line policy?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion at the board level? Any discussion at the public level? Roll call, please.
Trustee Smith?
Yes.
Trustee Mattel, sorry.
Yes.
Trustee Skiappa?
Yes.
Trustee Pavesa?
Yes.
Trustee Snyder?
Yes.
5-0.
5-0, the motion passes. And again, thank you, trustee Smith and Natal, with staff. Thank you, Evan, for staying on this task. That takes us to 8 considerations. Consideration of the Plan Commission recommendation to approve amendments to Section 8 of the zoning ordinance regarding outdoor dining, Z01, 2023. Evan? Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank
Go
you,
ahead,
Mayor.
take it away.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Tonight before you are some proposed amendments to the outdoor dining regulations in the zoning ordinance. The board directed the Plan Commission to hold a public hearing on this matter back in May of 2022. If you recall, that was at the time that the hours of operation and the live entertainment text amendments were going through. So the board's direction was to ensure that there were no conflicts with the language in this section of the zoning ordinance. It's important to note that the regulations before you tonight do not alter the where and how outdoor dining is allowed. So there still is a special use required in the business districts, and then the overriding regulations for the village center and the County Line Square PUD still apply. The regulations before you tonight clean up the language. They mirror the language that is in the County Line Square PUD for outdoor dining. And then it also takes some of the conditions that were frequently applied to special uses and codifies them within the zoning ordinance. One of the most notable changes here is going to be the hours of operation for outdoor dining. The language before you states that it must close a half hour prior to the closure of the principal business, so the interior of the restaurant. This is the same exact requirement for the County Line Square PUD. So the Plan Commission felt that it was important to have all of these regulations not conflict, or I should say hours of operation, not conflict with one another, so that everyone had an even playing field regarding the hours of operation. The Plan Commission held 2 public hearings on this in February and in March, and they unanimously approved the changes that you see before you tonight. And we do have Commissioner McCullion present to answer any questions that you might have.
So this is the culmination of what I asked Evan to do some time ago. And as we began to discover, nobody's fault, the various problems due to different PUD requirements, different zoning requirements from what was at the Village Center, what was at County Line Square, and out on Falco's. So this now brings everything consistent so that all restaurants operate under the same rules, whether or not they're in County Line Square, the Village Center, or not. Everybody has the same rules all the time. So finally there. Any questions by anybody on the board? Any questions from the public? Go ahead, Tom.
I like that maintaining consistency, and one thing I want to note is a word that stands out to me, it standardizes, so that everyone adheres to the same standard. So I think
Great.
it's a great idea.
Anyone else? Can I get a motion to approve amendments to Section 8 of the zoning ordinance regarding outdoor dining, Z01, 2023? Okay, sorry. Can I get a motion to direct staff to prepare the ordinance? That would be for the next meeting, approving the amendments to Section 8 of the zoning ordinance regarding outdoor dining, Z01, 2023.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Trustee Snyder?
Yes.
Trustee Paveza?
Yes.
Trustee Matal?
Yes.
Trustee Smith?
Yes.
Trustee Skiappa?
Yes.
5-0, the motion passes. It'll be on the agenda for the next meeting for passage. Okay, that takes us to 9, public comment. Is there any public comment on any item? No public comment. 10, reports and communications. Anita?
All right, well, if anyone was out and about this weekend, you definitely saw spring in the air and daffodils on the ground and crocuses and
Tulips, my
forsythias and tulips, wow. Well, it's absolutely beautiful, so enjoy. I just wanted to mention Armed Forces Day is on Saturday, May 20th, starting at 10 a.m. in front of the Village Hall. Our Mayor Grasso will be Master of Ceremony.
No.
No?
May 20th is also our 45th wedding anniversary, which
Oh.
we will be celebrating where we met on Nantucket.
Oh, wow. Wow. Congratulations, that's quite a milestone. Well, our keynote speaker will be Captain Scott Smith, who serves as a command at Sea Director at Surface Warfare Officers School. And the Burr Ridge Veterans Memorial Committee will also present the inaugural Patriot Award. Hope to see everyone there and hope it stays dry.
Anyone else? No? Okay, so the public understands, tonight it's a historic night. It's the last 7 PM started meeting for a village board in the village of Burr Ridge. A new board, three new trustees, not so new, will be sworn in as a result of the election results. Trustee Schiappa, Trustee Paveza, and Trustee Snyder all ran unopposed, and they all won. And that's also quite a testament, I think, to this board that all three ran unopposed. We will begin our meeting at 6:30 on May 8th with the swearing in of those three trustees. And we'll have a little celebration afterwards, and we'll have some business to get done on May 8th. So with that, can I get a motion to adjourn to May 8, 2023 at 6:30 PM?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you.